We were just having a routine wellness check with the doctor when she was 2 years old. And the doctor asked if there was anything that we noticed unusual about Brooklyn. And we said, oh, yeah, she seems really smart. In fact, sometimes she is thinking so hard when we're talking to her that it's like she doesn't even see us. It's like she just zones out. And the doctor said, wait a minute, what? And she asked us to explain that in more detail. And it wasn't a good thing. As it turned out, she was having seizures, and that's what the doctor suspected. So we got some testing done, and sure enough, she was having hundreds of petit mal seizures, or little seizures, where she would just disappear inside of herself for a few seconds, anywhere from 2 to 30 seconds every day. So that was a shock to us. It went from thinking we had a hyper-focused, very intelligent little girl to no, she's having seizures all day long. They immediately put her on a very common anti-seizure medication in liquid form, which didn't work. We tried that for a while, and that began a long cycle of experimenting with various medications.
When I was younger, doctors estimated that I was having over 100 seizures a day. So most of them were pretty brief. A few of them would last maybe 2 minutes at the longest. But it was very difficult to function with that many seizures. I believe I even would have trouble finishing sentences without having seizures. So anyway, my parents tried everything. I think there were something like 11 medications available at the time, and I went through like 9 of them, just trial and error. And the doctors would say scary things like, if you see a rash, bring her to the emergency room, because that could be a serious reaction, or like this medication might alter her personality and it might be permanent. And then they would say things like, well, we can try mixing medications and see what happens. And my parents were good about trying whatever the doctors recommended, but it was a scary time because you're trying to work with the brain and altering brain chemistry, and you don't know what's going to come out of that. And most of the medications would have what was called like a honeymoon phase, so things would be good initially. My seizures would calm down. I wasn't having so many, and then my body would like adjust to the medication, and I'd be on medication with these scary side effects and having just as many seizures as I was before.
We were very worried about Brooklyn's development and whether or not she would grow up to be a normal young woman. Between the drugs and the seizures, we didn't know what she would miss in school. We didn't know if she'd ever be able to drive, have a driver's license. It was a scary time for us. We also, unfortunately, had some scary misinformation that we were given. We were told that as she grew up, these seizures would gradually create damage in her brain or scarring in her brain, which turned out later to be inaccurate. But for young parents, this was a very scary time for us because there were just a lot of unknowns. And we happened to come across an article or an interview about Dr. Kossoff, Eric Kossoff, at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland. And he was looking for 20 students to do this trial that the Atkins Foundation was sponsoring to see if a modified version of the Atkins diet would help children with epilepsy. So the study that Dr. Kossoff was sponsored to perform, he was looking for 20 children And the 20 children had to have failed at least 3 anticonvulsant or epilepsy medications. And Brooklyn qualified for that, of course, because she had failed 5 or 6 up to this point. Brooklyn became, I believe, patient number 13. She and I flew out from Colorado to Baltimore to go to the Johns Hopkins Hospital and meet with Dr. Kossoff. When we first started the diet and first met Dr. Kossoff, it was a little alarming with how little guidance we were given. Go buy the Atkins Diet book and read it, and look at these 2 or 3 photocopied papers of things that are acceptable to eat. Keep track of your ketones, what she eats, and how many seizures she has a day. It was a little scary how little guidance there was. So when we got home, we felt very alone. There was nobody to ask questions. What we did do for a while was pepper the doctor with questions. He had given us his email address. We were emailing him 3-4 times a day. We were trying to call him. Is it okay to eat this? All these questions. And he got a little frustrated with us, and probably rightly so. He's a very busy man. He's a neurologist. Happily, we were able to find 1 or 2 of the other parents that were in the same study. And they formed, together with them, we formed a little Yahoo support chat group. Back then, Yahoo had this forum where you could have a chat group, and we traded recipes. We talked there about supplements, which supplements tripped us up, which ones were okay to take, which were not. What were seizure triggers that we learned, and we learned together. When's the best time of day to check for ketones, and how do you pack a school lunch, and how do you deal with so many things? How do you deal with family gatherings? What if the family is sneaking your child food? What do you do about that? And it was so nice to have a place to go and talk to people who were going through the same thing. Because for a while, for the first few months, it felt extremely lonely. So not only was it scary and all new, but it was lonely. And that's why, because there were so few resources, that's why we eventually decided to put together a website. And sometimes all we needed was encouragement. Hearing somebody else's good story, that wow, so-and-so just went 30 days without having a seizure and we could celebrate that with them, gave us the motivation to stick with it. And we're so grateful that we did.
When I was 12, I hadn't been 12 for very long actually. So like late 11, early 12, I started noticing a decrease in seizures. And then all of a sudden I started having seizure-free days. And then gradually, like, the time between seizures was just getting longer and longer and longer. And I remember, I remember what we believe triggered my last seizure was, I had a really carby meal. It was, the tricolored noodles. I used to call them curly noodles, like the spiral. See, I don't know what they're actually called. The tricolored noodles, and something about so it seemed like certain food dyes would tend to trigger seizures too. Plus, it was high carb and all that, and so I had a seizure the next day after I had that for dinner the night before. And that was my last one. I remember, the following year or so, if I ever had, a brief lapse of attention, I'd be worried that maybe that was a seizure. If you get kind of distracted, everybody kind of has moments where they zone out or get distracted, or, and so if that would ever happen to me, or if I hadn't been eating well a certain day, I remember there was one day I had a lot of carby foods and a soda at lunch, and it was hot, and we were in a like a stuffy room later on, and like I just didn't feel well, and so like the whole like blood sugar shift, I was like, am I gonna have a seizure? Like what's I don't know what's happening. But that was like it never was the way it was before. Like I haven't had any seizures since.
I want to thank everybody who's agreed to share their story. You have no idea what sort of an impact this can have on somebody who's new to this. Imagine a new parent with a child who has seizures. They might be scared. They don't know what their options are. And so thank you to all of you who've been willing to do these interviews and share your experience with others. And we hope for those of you who find this channel that you do find some encouragement. If you'd like to be interviewed, reach out to us, leave a comment perhaps, or share your story in the comments, because really there are people from all over the world who are looking for a sense of community or a little bit of encouragement, or just to hear that their story is like somebody else's story, that we're not alone in this journey to manage seizures in ourselves or our loved ones.